record. Okay. Very good. And now I am going to go to share screen. And before I pull up my presentation, I'm going to show you some of the things that I gave to you today. The first one, and hopefully the first one is about 10 pages of every kind of directory. If you haven't had this one before, I tried to put it together in an omnibus thing to give you not just you should go find a directory, but to give you some other things that I've talked about before that are available to you in that city county directory and a way for you to begin to look at those things. So there's some items there that you can look at. There are some things that you can go through. They are pure gold. I will give you, or I've given you today, a record sheet of mine. And that's only to help you make your own, because I find that people make their own record sheets unless you're in a library and you're going through a bunch of directories at once, then you're going to want to use something like mine. Mine is not perfect or gold. It's just the way I do it. And I'm willing to share it. There's stuff about telephone directories in here, farm and ranch directories, brand books. These are all kinds of directories, professional organization directories, fraternals, property and land and taxes are all types of directories. And Inquest will always have a directory, coroner records, and I've given you the goals, what you should do, and what those kinds of things can help you with. There are naturalization directories, all kinds of government directories. Everything is here. Religious and church directories, which until about 1980, you'll find that 60 to 70% of our people could be found in a church directory. That's not so today, but if you're looking back at that point, it's going to be very helpful to you. Professions with directories like nurses and telephone companies and lawyers and all kinds of things, medical groups, school yearbooks, alumni directories, reunion books are a directory. Tax lists, unclaimed assets, which you'll find every once in a while. Anyway, that stuff is all in there. And so, you know, bank it on your computer or whatever for when you want to look. But before you begin looking at too many directories, you need to know why you're looking at that particular kind of directory. And I kind of try to do that there really quickly. So I'm going to stop that share, and hopefully I'm just going to show you this one real quick. Hopefully, let's see if it came up. No, I need to get rid of this one first, don't I? Okay, I'll go back and go to the share screen and throw this one up, the city county, and hopefully it's there for you. And that's self-explanatory. So I'm going to stop that share. And then there are just a couple of others, like your notes for today that are there. And like I say, that's kind of a loose thing because I have changed it a little bit, not changed it, but added to it, shall we say. So I gotten rid of that one. And then one more that I'm going to show you. This is a timeline component with comments over at the right side that tell you why I did a particular thing or show you the strategy that I did in putting this into my timeline. Because a timeline is composed of some strategies that you use rather than just random facts. And I don't think people always understand that. Yes, you can put some random facts in there, but they'll never really be random because you've got a reason for putting that particular thing in. So without further ado, I am going to go to my screen. Hopefully, let's see, that one needs to be stopping that share. And I'll go back here and hopefully go into my presentation. Only it doesn't want to do it. Holy smokes, folks, just a second. I'll make sure I stop the share on all of these and we'll go back and we'll see what we can do. Ah, there it is. There's my presentation. Hopefully you can see it. If you can't, Linda or someone's going to tell me right here in this room. So tools are what's elementary, my dear Watson. I would theorize that this is what Sherlock Holmes would say as a detective, or that detective that we all knew, at least from his fictional detective life. I really believe that tools are what are necessary for us to really be able to work our genealogy in a very purposeful manner. So today we're going to talk about timelines, directories, and censuses in those timelines, because those are all part of your genealogy toolbox. Let's talk first real quickly about the genealogical proof standard that we're all working towards, even if we're amateur and just aiming to get just a bit about our lives or about someone in our family. Because remember, we want to get the truth. We want to know what's there. So the first one always that we're working with constantly is reasonably exhaustive research. The other one that we're going to work with today is number 3, analysis and correlation of all sources. That's where we really are as we look at things and try to find our sharpest and our best things to do in fulfilling that genealogical proof standard as we do our genealogy. Again, just as a quick reminder, I regard timelines as a major organizer. I know that many other professional genealogists do. In fact, it's what we do as we're trying to put someone's life together if we're working with a client. For example, a major goal for all of us would be to reconstruct your ancestor's life as a means to find his or her parentage and lineage. I've been working with that one for a long time with my family, especially with my grandpa Lee, and I'm going to use him today as we work with this talk. I want to remind you that time and place are geographical tools that we can use really well because we're looking for patterns within our ancestors' lives as they move through time and place. And you need to work strategically with that, thinking of what kind of time and place data can help you to determine that pattern. They can tell you place, such as country, state, county, city, town, rural area, length of residence. The neat thing about place is that as we move across various places in the world, those events are available within various kinds of formal records and anything that we might have to do with ancestral heritage. They're going to be available in many of those records. We're also going to have time or even some timely factors that are important, for example, to a national good. The most recent one that we all have, or most of us had, I think, that we all went through, was this thing called a pandemic. If you haven't recorded that as a very important thing in your own census timeline, you need to do that. It's kind of been a blur, and we're still experiencing that blur, but it's a very valuable thing to do. You can also, when you're looking at censuses, again, I'm just going to tell you quickly, you can go back to data.census.gov to get any data that you want from any census in the United States. And I'll also refer you to my Oscar Eskew Lee timeline for today with the comments along the right side. I want to increase your odds of getting good info by teaching you how to examine and extend the location and time periods that you're working with. My grandpa was born in 1879. In order to capture his family, of course, I was fortunate enough to pretty much know where his mom and her parents had been prior to 1879. And if I were just starting with my grandfather, I might at that point start with 1870 and at least think, what can I find in 1870? Well, of course, those decennial censuses, they could be a help if I can find them. You need to become familiar with any of the materials like directories and church records, civil records, anything that you might have And this is not random. You need to know what's available. You can go out and look at county materials, remember, out at the Family Search Wikipedia, so you know what's available for a particular county during a certain time. I'm hoping that you'll get the idea that if you just have one source and you focus on that one source, that's kind of limited. You need to get corroborating evidence, things that can help you to correlate whether or not that fact could be true. After all, even my grandpa's name, Oscar Eskew, is really not, when you look at it out there, it is not an uncommon name. I found at least 4 others. Luckily, they weren't in Nebraska, but another one of them happened to be in Montana. So stop treating each source you peruse as an isolated fact and learn about every possible other thing you can that you can put into that timeline. I want you to think on using related by time directories and directory types of things. I gave you that huge list, that 10 pages of different kinds of directories. If you've got city county directories, one of the first things you might want to do, and I'll relate a little story with this. We had a lady who came in here a couple of years ago, and she was from out of state. She and her brother had been doing their Great Falls genealogy via the things they could find on the internet, and of course out at Ancestry. There were, and there are, various Great Falls directories, and they happen to be for the time period they were looking for. She was still looking at least for another family, which they had found in Great Falls that they were following, but her brother had given up because when he looked in those Great Falls directories, he did not see the name he expected to see. Well, this lady was looking, and she also, for a couple of years, had the usual query of, well, where did these people go suddenly? They're not in Great Falls. And I looked and I said, well, let's look back at the previous things to see what they were doing. Well, they were busy working, I believe, on a railroad, and one of them had been a miner. And that brought up to me the idea that I should look in the back of those city county directories for other cities and little towns in Cascade County. Now that just seemed really, really relevant to me. I would go through the entire directory. And you know what she admitted is, as soon as her brother did not find the family name in the Great Falls City directory, he gave up. He had not looked at those other small towns. Well, guess what? We looked, and that family was there out in Belt, Montana. One of the first places that you might look in the back of that city county directory for a time. And later on, we found them again in another place just up the road, working in a mine, and they still weren't in Great Falls, but they had been there. So you need to look at a city county directory carefully to ensure that you know what all parts are there so that you can take best advantage. So you can use church directories, of course. You can use known geographical locations like a move. I did not find my Oscar right away because I didn't know where he moved. He was a mystery to me, and a lot of his early life still is an early mystery. And I'm going to tell you that one document is better than none. Nail down those official documents where possible. I try to look for marriage documents first because marriage documents might give me the opportunity to look at more than one generation, especially if the witnesses happen to be related. So that helps. I don't look for birth first and think that I have to find that before I find other things. I'll look at marriages. I look at the death certificate because it gives me a second chance to look for a possible birth date. Divorce records, get these for all the siblings too. Don't just look at your one person because you're letting yourself out of information when you do that. If you're going to look at the fan club, that is all of the brothers, sisters, and other known people, that can help you too. And throw those dates into your timeline because that tells you these are people that your main ancestor you're looking for he's been with them, or she's been with them before. Again, it's a major organizing tool to construct large and small details for an ancestor, find out about life-changing events like that pandemic. And you should begin with what you know, that birth. If you don't have a birth, look for the baptism. Many times that stands in another country for the birth, and you'll need to read the explanations to find out whether that's true or not for the particular register you're looking at. Do you know more? Moves made and why? Not just for your ancestor, but his friends or her friends. Well, let me tell you about Oscar Eskew Lee, my grandpa, that his timeline that I constructed just by using, first of all, censuses, directories, the news, and a few other things, because he was really hard to find. First of all, he was illegitimate. Born in 1879 to his mom in Nebraska. She was 16 to 17 years old. And so my first thought was, oh, goody, I'm going to find him in the 1880 census. Nope. You're going to see in a few minutes that I didn't find him in that census. I found his mom. I found her siblings. I found an uncle of his that was born 3 months after Oscar was born, but I didn't find him. So I theorized that maybe that birth meant a shame for his mom. I didn't know. I thought, oh, nuts. I don't know where to look next. I found him finally in a Nebraska census in 1885. That was after his mom married a fellow by the name of William Eskew, but I did not find him till then. To that time, there had been 3 state censuses available in Nebraska. They did one in 1881. They did one in 1882. They did one in 1885. And that's the only one I found him in. So don't forget the basic research rule. Examine everything you can find in the time period before reaching the conclusion that you've looked everywhere. And consider every kind of directory. And that might be an overreach, but I knew that the family at that point that was in Weeping Water, Cass County, Nebraska, belonged frequently to either a primitive Methodist church or some kind of Methodist church. And there was one bunch that later came that were Baptists. I'm going to tell you, I struck out when I looked at directories for my Grandpa Lee all the way through. I did not strike out with the fan club. Luckily, I looked to see if the fan club was in there, his friends, his acquaintances, neighbors, and so on, and discovered that his wife, Mary Nanically, always made it to a Catholic church, or if she couldn't make it to a Catholic church, then to any church in the neighborhood. And that particular information my dad told me. And that's about all my dad told me. Not too much else, because he didn't know very much about his dad either. So here's what Oscar's timeline in a census shopping list looked like. He was born in 1879 in Weeping Water, Cass, Nebraska. There's an 1880 census. Mary, his mom, was there, but not Oscar, not listed. He isn't listed in the 1881 census fragment, state census, or the 1882, but he is listed in 1885 when his mom is listed with his stepfather and Oscar is listed with 2 other siblings that had been born. However, after that, I found, or I know where to find, Oscar in all of these censuses. The 1900, because remember, 1890 doesn't exist. The 1910, 1920, 1930, 40, and 50. He dies at Christmas time, 62, but I know where he was at that point, so I can at least put it into my family story as his residence. Not an official census, but I can put it in there. So that's what we call using the lifespan strategy to start. Use a lifespan, look for the censuses within that lifespan, look before and look after, so that you can find the first census needed. Don't forget to check for state censuses in Montana. You can forget that. We never had one, but many others did. And I'll tell you again that that book that I talked to you about 2 weeks ago, Bill Dollarhide's The Census Book, is a census book that you need because it can help you with every state census, anything that you can think of, and tell you whether or not it's available for a place that you're looking. Going forward, if I'm looking at 1960, I have a place to look for that next census because I'm going to want to look at each person's lifespan, everybody in his fan club. So I can confirm those familial relationships and his friendships and the people he associated with. These provide reliable pieces of data, and it's essential because it provides an official way for you to begin to look at the records. Now, I'm going to tell you, it was just as valuable for me. It was a bummer, but it was just as valuable for me to find that Oscar was not in the 1880 census. It's a negative kind of fact, but I didn't find him. And it made me think, what happened to him at first, until I went back and remembered again that illegitimate births were seldom talked about and certainly not recorded in many places. And so I could look at that at least as a justification for him not being there. Later, I found that there was information from another family, the Sanford Coglizer family, that said Oscar was always in the home in that Coglizer home before his mom married Mr. Eskew. So I've got an informal kind of evidence. Not the best, but still better than nothing. So I'm going to show you what I've got in my Roots Magic 9 particular family regarding him so that you can see what's here. I can take this. I just took a screenshot of this, of facts that I had in about his life. And so I could record his birth, and notice over at the right, there's a little pen stem. It's not the stem, pardon me. It's the pointy end of the pen. And underneath that would be the proof for where I found that. In the census for June 1880, I put that in even though I didn't find it. And the little note paper over at the right will tell you I didn't find him, but it'll tell you everyone else I found and why I believe he needed to be there. I found him when he was 6 in Lancaster, Stevens County, Nebraska. And then I've got a big sweep of time where I cannot find him until about the age of 21. I know he has to be probably in Havre at that point, but I cannot find him. I looked through every single bit of the Shoto census, and I believe I looked in one other census, been a while ago, to see if I could find him in 1900. I know he has to be there. He's been out of his home, according to family stories, since he was age 13. That's what they said. Note, I don't have that in here because I haven't yet been able to prove it. Yes, I have it informally in a note, but not as proof of his life. I next find him in a directory, in the Havre directories. The Shoto County directories just proved invaluable to me. I found him on May 16, 1903. That's when that particular directory was made at Mrs. Long's boarding house in Havre, Montana. And after that, I found him virtually in every one of the Shoto or Hill County directories, because that's the next county that Shoto gave some of its land to. I found him there. I also found him in lawsuits entered into court that November, just by looking at a court calendar. And so you can see I've got proof there, and I've got notes. I found his occupation in 1905 because he was busy operating the Havre steam laundry when Havre had a big fire and the laundry burned. And he is mentioned that he ran in and saved bunches of clothing that had been bundled up to be washed. And so I got lucky there. I have his marriage. I have the next censuses forever, as I've shown you. I have him out in the country at Gorman, just a little tiny place. Actually, he later names that place Oscar, Montana, after himself. So these are what you can do with the timeline. It's very easy if you choose to do it inside of a program. I do more than that, actually, because I want to be able to analyze and strategize and write questions in my timelines. So when I didn't find him listed in the 1880 census and I knew his mom was there, the first thing I did was I checked the census for other Coglizer relatives in that area in Weeping Water to find out if he was in their home. Nope, not there. So where was he from 1881 to 1899? Was he with his family or on his own? Because I haven't even found, I've found two things that refer to him being in school, but I haven't found a school record that can verify that yet. I haven't found him in the 1900 census. I know, however, that parts of his family, his immediate family, that is his siblings, were in Nebraska and Missouri. He isn't with them in the places where they are. But I do find him in that boarding house. But before that, I'm still looking, and I'm still hopeful that I will find things. As more newspapers come online, they provide me with opportunities to look, because he liked to use his name. He liked to use Oscar Eskew, and he liked to use it in things like Oscar Eskew house moving and things like that. And so I'm hopeful that I'll find an ad. So here he is. I'm telling you that he's been elected to the school board in 1914 out there in Gorman. His draft registration is there. Censuses are there. He organized the Hill County Dairymen's Association, which is, I found him listed there many times after that, always in the newspaper, but it was just like a little directory because it named everybody who'd come to a meeting. So think of directory-like things. I found him in property, found him in various things. And so I could record that in my family, in my Roots Magic database. And I liked it because it kept track of it for me. It's not enough. I'd like to have put in things there like the 1919 pandemic, because I can say that all of his kids at least made it successfully through there. Nobody died. Nobody died in the family up in Havre during that pandemic. So the directories are going to add more details. I found him in every available directory. I found an overlap, in fact. He becomes Oscar Lee through an official court document in September 1912, I believe. But over the next 2 years, I still find him mentioned by others as Oscar Eskew, because I'm not saying the name didn't take, I'm just saying they were more familiar with Oscar Eskew. So I looked under both names. In the brand book, guess what? I found him under Oscar Eskew after 1912. I found him in all those directories, found him in Big Fork directories, but he lived in a little place called Ferndale, and all they listed was the post office address, which was Big Fork. I did find him, however, in the Lake County school censuses from 1938 through 1952, because he had some of his grandsons living with him going to school out in that Ferndale school. So he was listed as the guardian, and that's another type of directory for you that you can look at. Remember, that gives the name of the child, the age, the birth date, the parents or the guardians, and the address. He was also took his turn being a school trustee there. So he was a trustee twice in his life, once over in the Havre area and once in the Big Fork, Montana area. And of course, I've found him a few other places too. Now, in order to fill him in or to fill in any of these ancestors, you need to look at their fan club. That is, those friends, acquaintances, neighbors, and so on, and the ancestors of that period. And I found his wife, Mrs. Oscar Lee, listed both as Mary Lee and also as Mrs. Oscar Lee in the Catholic Ladies' Aid Directory for St. Catherine's Circle for Big Fork. From 1940 through 1958, she is listed each and every year. His sons, Jack and Orrin Lee, were listed in the Veterans of Foreign Wars directory for the Big Fork area 1950 through at least 1957, when they moved away from that area and no longer belonged locally. But all three of his sons, including my dad, Byron, were listed in those Big Fork area directories through 1963, just after he died, and my Uncle Jack moved, my Uncle Orrin was dead, and my family moved to Billings. But through that time, I found them in those directories. Strangely enough, he did not join a Grange over in the Flathead area, but there were others that he knew and he was well acquainted with in Ferndale. So I checked those. And his wife, Mary, the minute she got to Ferndale, joined the Ferndale Sewing Circle, which is still the longest lived or longest organized type of club in Montana. It is still operating today. She joined as soon as she got to Ferndale, and she was there until her death. So the directories there helped me to fill in some things about the family. Oh, and by the way, I could also find him in a list of the first volunteer fire department in Ferndale. And that's just a list that they happen to have in their fire station, but I consider it a type of directory. So use directory blanks. Don't count on pieces of paper and various things. If you've got your timeline with you, hopefully you've got one run off that you can just write in so that you can put stuff in. But if not, I prefer to use a directory blank, especially if I know that I'm going after a considerable number of facts, because then I can put them all down at once, kind of put down once where I found them, and use the blank form and then write it into my timeline. Remember, the more we write things actively into our timeline, the more likely we are to remember them. True fact, and it's part of good reading research. Take time to record that and analyze that data. Do you have the right person? I'm lucky with my dad because there's only 2 Byron Lees in Montana, and the other one happens to be over in Libby, Montana, and no, it wasn't my dad. I know exactly who the person was. So even though Lee was common, Byron was not as common. I did have to look at that other person and say, is it possible my dad had 2 families? Always consider what could be happening. Here's what I collect when I look at that directory information. I write down that name exactly as I found it in the directory. I don't shortcut it. I don't want to confuse the person with another generation of the same name. Maybe it's a son who is over the age of 14 and out in the work world. I check to see who shares that same address with the person I believe to be my ancestor. Is it a relative? Is it somebody who's a member of the fan club? Because I go look at them too, just to make sure that I've got what I need. And I make sure, of course, that I get the date and place and so on. You have my sheet so you can see exactly what I do with that. And I'm hoping that you'll share with me if you've got another neat form that you think is even better, because all forms, the more forms you have, if you use them, are always better. Then use the blank form, use as many lines as you need, but you can see what it would look like here in my blank form that I've given you. This is what Oscar Eskew would look like before 1912 when he changes his name. I'm taking it that there's nothing in there, or maybe for spouse, I'll say spouses weren't recorded. That's another thing. Say, no, they just recorded the guys. No spouses, unless it was a widow woman. He's at a boarding house. He's working at the Havre Laundry, but I can't tell whether he's the employer or the employed. So I put owner and put question mark. And there's my years for that particular directory. And then I begin my evidence analysis, knowing that even if I've made a snap judgment, translated initial read, it may change as I gain more directory info. Does it appear to be legitimate? I put the information and my preliminary analysis into my timeline, and maybe it's as simple as me saying, this looks to be correct. Maybe it's as simple as that, but behind it, I'll attempt to put at least my date. If I were looking at today's, then I'd put behind it November 8, 23, so that I know when I made that judgment and I can keep track, because I'm never going to be finished with my analysis probably. If I find good information again, I'm going to reconsider what I already have. This then is a best genealogical practice. When you begin connecting your directories and your censuses in your timeline, you've connected two really good, what I call starter pieces of geographical and time location factors within your timeline. Things that can really help you so that you know that they're there. I use my timeline for everything. When I went to Norway, I took only my timeline of my family. This is another family, not the Lee family, but I took only that timeline with me. I had everything in there: birth, marriage, death, baptism, when they were confirmed, all kinds of things. They were all in there, plus all of the other things that were there. And so were my questions, because I knew I was going to an archive in central Norway, one of the best archives that would be there. And I knew already what they had, that they had out online. And I hoped they had even more in their archive, and they did. And I knew I was going to be checking the libraries, because one of the things I had discovered is that city and county directories are not unique to the United States. That's right. Other places have been using city and county directories for a long time. You can find some things that I would call a form of county directory back to the 14th and 15th century in England. No, they're not consistent year after year, but they sure do give great information. And yes, they give a type of geographic location. Make sure that when you look at any directory, instead of just diving in and going for the gusto, that is the information you want, you need to take a look to see and orient yourself to that particular directory so you know what is in there. Don't forget that gentleman who gave up looking for his family because he didn't find them in Great Falls. You might find them in another part of that directory. All directories are a little bit different, and they organize themselves differently. Fraternal directories, for example, are going to organize themselves frequently according to the offices and the people in that organization for that particular year. Then they're going to list other things. So be careful of what you're doing. Look at the ranch and farm directories and the brand books, newspapers for active churches. Early newspapers are also going to be one of your very best things that you can look at to get a from week to week informal directory of who's available professionally in that community. Look at one of the pages in a weekly newspaper, and you are likely to find all of the people who are advertising businesses and who are professional people there. I'm still looking for that Oscar Eskew, because when he came to the Kalispell area in Montana, I thought he should be retired. And here he is. He's advertising himself in a neat little thing. It just says Oscar Lee, house moving. That's it. And he'd done that a couple of times in his life. You can do things up through the late 60s into about 1975 to find lists of hospital check-ins and checkouts in newspapers, police court records, traffic violations, and the hotel registers for the popular hotels in towns will also tell you who checked in, and you'll find out if the missus is there too. After I collect that information, immediately, I don't say, oh, goody, I've got the information. Well, I do, but I record that information in my Roots Magic 9 program. I understand many of you are just using paper pencil, and that's just fine to be able to work your way through that. You may be using Family Tree Maker. You may be using some other program. They are all good so long as you are putting your material into some kind of a permanent base that you can then share or send on to someone else. Immediately after I put information in, I print out a new copy because I think of all of these. My Roots Magic 9 program is a worksheet for me where I can write questions. I can do things and I can look where I need to go. If I'm starting with the new family in Roots Magic, the first thing I do, take a look at the lifespan and then immediately start putting in all of the censuses that I need. I don't mean going to get them. I mean putting down everyone I should be looking for. And I do that when I'm not familiar with the state. I do that by looking at Bill Dollarhide's book, the census book. There are others, of course, and you may find those, and they may be valuable to you. I just record that, and then I begin looking for those because they're one of my first ways. They're what I call a shopping list. And that's the kind of shopping I like to do. So here's something that I recorded in one of my husband's family timelines. This was the Stokes family. They actually came from England into Boston. I had already found several variations in their names. I always keep those surname variations up at the top of my timeline so that I know I'm looking at, or even that I should be looking for, variations. And for this one, since I wasn't too familiar, I also put the associated family, which was Whiteman. So my first thing where I found this person in England, after I had gone backwards from Boston, was I found him in 1758 on Chandler Street, St. George, Hanover Square, London, England, in what is called a rate book entry. And what a nice little thing those things are. They fit the ideal of being a directory very, very well. And I could say in there, well, he paid fees or taxes on rents. He paid them on the poor, on scavengers. That's an interesting one. Scavenging anything they can, and roads. And so the additional thing it would tell me is that in 1758, he had to be of legal age. Those were my comments. Here's where the questions. Who were his parents? I still hadn't found them. I knew one sibling, but where were the others? Had he been apprenticed? What business was he in? I knew his wife was Jane Bell. I wanted to know when he married her. Notice I have a line through that because I did find that information. I keep the question. I line it out indicating I've answered it because I don't want to be guilty of asking the same question and wasting my time later on researching something I've already done. Had he been married previous to this marriage? I think he was, but I still can't prove that. And who was Jane Bell? Who were her parents? So I had a whole host of things there to put into my timeline. And that's the kind of thing I do with any timeline. So take advantage of the other stuff you find in a directory. If you're looking in a church directory, look for members of her fan club, all of her friends. Were they all, for example, Lutherans? Were they all Reformed Lutherans? Was this a family that strictly went to the Mennonite church? Did they belong to any other Anabaptist churches? You better look in all of those kinds of church directories. In the farm directory, I took advantage of being able to find Oscar and his relatives because they were all there too, and a couple of friends. But the big thing I got was more confirmation again of the actual homestead land descriptions. The same land descriptions were there telling me they still had that same stuff because this came from the taxables. Note the lists, the clubs, the societies, the rural fire districts. Note who's listed in the particular things like people who belong to the school board and so on. And record all of that, even if it's what you might think of is bonus. In our Great Falls directories, I've found some anomalies. In the 1913 city census, yes, there were two of these that we know of. 1896 and 1913 were the only ones that were saved out of some city censuses done in Great Falls. But the 1913 city census is in a book out here in the Montana room, and it includes the number of children in the household. Doesn't have their names, but boy, that's valuable information. And when I compared the 1913 city census with the 1913 city county directory, yes, I found differences. I found where I could probably confirm that some of that city county data was a little dated. In other words, maybe it had come from the year before. In some years, like 1915, the deaths of adults are mentioned, but not the kids. And in some years, the move-outs are mentioned. So look to see what those things do, because sometimes those people got paid for extra information. That is, the people who were collecting city county directory info. And so they provided that. Don't think that it's going to be the totally whole picture, but it can give you other facts you didn't even know you needed. Well, last time I gave you decennial census questions for your genealogy toolbox, and hopefully you got those and you got started on your timeline. Remember what you learned in constructing a timeline from your school days. I'm happy to share any of my timelines. Use the Tool 1 Lifespan Strategy, available decennial and state censuses. Use directories, all kinds of things that work within those decades. Maybe it can be those church directories, grade directories, volunteer fire department lists, clubs. Maybe it's a dairymen's association, like what I found for my grandpa. And boy, did I not expect to find that one. It's all a mystery until we track it down through reliable sources, and those become even more tools for us. I admit genealogical sleuthing is something that I'm really addicted to. I'm really glad that we have this library hangout place that we have here in Great Falls. I hope you're addicted to finding the best genealogical proof information, and that you will use timelines as an all-in-one organizer. They can really help you. Remember, it's going to have proven facts, your family materials, your questions, your analyses. And then you can just bundle it all so you don't have all of those piles of files, as I call them. And by the way, date your analysis when you do it. If I've got a date in there that said, as of 2003, I didn't know where my grandpa was until 2005, I know now I've got information that I should have corrected, and I need to go back and say, hey, in 2003, I found solid evidence of him being in Choteau County in Havre, Montana. And so I have to change what's there. And my first analysis needed to be updated. So I expect always to go back and look at these things. Every once in a while, every few years, I will, once I've worked with a family a great deal, I will run out that whole timeline again, look at it carefully and say, what have I learned that I didn't know before? Now, last time I had somebody who contacted me afterwards and said, I know you gave the names of 4 or 5 materials. I've got them down, but can you show that again? I just happen to have a couple of pictures. I only have 2 pictures, but here's one that's called the Family Tree Fact Book, Key Genealogy Tips and Stats for the Busy Researcher. This was done by Diane Haddad and Family Tree Magazine about 4 years ago now. And it's still out. It's still a really good book. If somebody's looking to give you a Christmas present, this is a pretty good one for under $20. The other one is the Census Book, again, by Bill Dollarhide. I just think that this is absolutely outstanding. It's, however, is about $35, I think. And still available. You can get it from various places out on the internet. You'll use this book like crazy. Well, you'll use the other one too. You really will. You'll use Family Tree Fact Book because it's just going to help you to figure out where you want to go next. They're not everything, but they sure will help to point you to the next thing. Next time, and it's not November 30th. I need to have you correct that right now. It's November 29th. Which is a Wednesday. I'm going to be with Cheryl doing a thing called looking at your genealogical databases like Family Tree Maker, Legacy, Roots Magic. There are 5 or 6 that are really popular today. You can also use Family Searches. databases, just to show you what's available, what their features are. You're going to get a handout that's about, I don't know, about 25 pages of those main databases in the invitation. So even if you're not able to come to the session, you'll have it available for yourself. It's good material that is available to you that just says, hey, if you want to go beyond a handwritten timeline and you're thinking about working with a genealogical database, or you're currently working with one, but you just want to know what the latest information is about all of those, then it's an opportunity for you to look at them and see what others think. And the meeting that day will be a little shorter, but it's an opportunity for you to discuss your needs or the ways in which you use this. I happen to be using Roots Magic 9, and I'm using it way beyond what I thought its capabilities were, because I'm using it to put together information which may eventually be a book about the little community of Ferndale, Montana. It just has a couple of other things that were quite helpful to me. I can list people who are associated with my ancestor, and they don't have to be related through marriage. They could just be friends. I can also make lists in there of all the different kinds of organizations that are in the community, and then I can run out that list. So I find it helpful. But I know, I've looked at people and seen how valuable they've found Legacy. I've seen how valuable people find Family Tree Maker. And so what Cheryl and I are aiming to give you next time on November 29, remember, is an opportunity to look at an overview of genealogy databases. And with that, I'm going to stop the share and get back to you all. And you may unmute yourself should you desire. And if you have questions, please ask them now. Nobody's asleep, so this is good.
I have a question.
Okay.
You talked about creating these timelines. Tell me again where you store those. Are they on your computer? Are they in your database? Are they metadata tagged? Are they physical?
They're not meta. Well, only the things I need to have metadated are metadated. But candidly, I use what I'm working with what I really call my dirty timelines. That is because they've got questions within them. They don't just have answers; they have the questions there too. I am working with Word, because I know that I can move backward and forward in Word, but you could use Google Docs the same way. There's a variety of things that you could use. It's not magic, but yes, I have that. I know other people who are saying, wow, Jan, it's a lot to consider. So I'll just take some screenshots of my stuff in my legacy database, and that'll be good enough for me so that I can keep track of it and I can scroll notes on it. The main thing is, when you're locating these, I have some available in my databases. By that, I mean every single person in my database has a timeline.
Oh, wow.
And because it's in there, it's all the things that I have recorded. And then what I do is with my Cogleiser family, because I know that Cogleiser family has so many branches, and I've been trying to find information helpful to me from those databases. I have a 39-page timeline that includes some of those other families, so that I'm always reminded again of who was where, when, and who I've contacted and worked with. And if I'm going down to the library in Salt Lake, I'll take that total timeline with me. I might take my computer with me, or because I know I can have it there. But if I know I'm going to an archive, like a place in Denmark or in Norway or in Austria, I know they're not going to allow me to have that computer in there. They're going to allow me a pencil that they give me. And so I'm very careful of what I have. I'm going to want to then go back out to my locker if I'm at that archive and take a look at my data information again, so I know what I'm looking at next. I will tell you that when I did that in Norway and they saw what I had for my book and that it was fastened together, not something I could put into a file, and not something I could easily rip something else out of. The guy was very kindly with me, and he let me keep it in the room. He let me have it. In fact, he looked at it. But my main point with the timeline is it's a working document. It is a tool. That's how I use it. I use it as a collection device, a tool where I can record my information, then I can ruminate or analyze, hopefully, or put a big cross across something if I find out something wasn't true, and go on with the next part of what I'm doing. Was that Desiree?
No, it was Suzanne.
Okay, Suzanne, did I answer it kinda?
Well, I just am wondering where logically, if I just, after all that work, I want to be able to find it and add on to it.
Oh,
So
well, I
I'm
would,
wondering if I just put it, if I just file it electronically in my documents folder.
yeah, you can file it electronically and add to it. One of the things that I do is, once I know that I'm ready to go after a document, then I'll run it out again because I want to use it to work on and put all my notes on. That's my choice. So you can have documents that are electronic so that you don't have paper scattered everywhere. You can have papers that are a timeline that is in a folder that you take with you, because I don't take anything else, folks. I have my stuff in there and I know what I'm looking at. I've already put my questions in before I go to an archive, or at least my beginning questions. I'm going to have more questions, I know. That timeline, if you can visualize this in your mind, my timeline would consist of the timeline on the right with a blank sheet of paper from the last piece of timeline on the left, because then I can write questions over there on the left, or observations, or whatever I want. That's just what I do.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
You might need to explain that, or maybe go with.
Other questions? Gary?
You find your SQ spelled with an A sometimes?
Yep, sure do.
Found them in Cascade in a 2015 directory here.
Yep. I also found them recently as ESQUE out in Coeur d'Alene, and it is the family. Whatever. Randy?
Hi, yeah. I have a question about the individual worksheet form. Do you use that in conjunction with the timeline, or do you find it redundant?
I don't find it redundant. What I'll frequently do, Randy, is I'm just going to tell you what I did when I was in Trondheim, Norway. I knew that they had city-county directories. I didn't know what I'd find, but I had a form with me because I wanted one form when I went over to that part in the city library in Trondheim and found that section, because I just wanted to be able to go from book to book to book. I didn't want to have to keep coming back to my desk and writing it in the timeline. Then I took that source information and immediately reincorporated it into my timeline that night. So it's a case of being another worksheet where I could then collect the information across several types of directories and collect what I needed and then get it into my timeline.
And do you, how do you put source information on the timeline or the individual worksheet? Do you use like a reference number or footnote to
Nope.
the document that has the full citation, or?
Nope, I'm not that formal, Randy. What I do is immediately at the end of a particular item that I find, I put the source in right then. I put it right there. And usually in either parentheses or whatever, I will put it there because I know I'm going to have another thing that gives all the full references, all of my references when I'm done with a particular project, but I want those references, those sources to be there so that when I'm looking in a library, I know where I got that last thing from. I know exactly where it came from. And I do a lot of cut and paste because it's pretty easy to do. If I'm working on a computer, for example, and I'm working with a census, let's just visualize what it looks like at Family Search, because they have this feature. You could just go up and grab the source and cut and paste it into your document right then. You can do that with Ancestry or with MyHeritage, any of them that have that particular thing right there. You can just do it and grab it. And mostly, I will tell you, a great many of them follow Elizabeth Schoen Mills format, so it's really great. So you know that you're getting the essential information. You got to have enough information to be able to find it again.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
And have I ever, Randy, forgotten one of those and said, oh, shoot, or something like that? I certainly have, and then had to go back and grab that again because I want to know exactly where that was. If I'm looking at a census and I'm noticing that I was looking at several of my families at once, the fan club, that means that I looked in the pages previous to where I found my person and the pages afterwards, because I wanted to be able to find everyone that I thought was close. I want to make sure I have all those sources so I've got the right page numbers. I don't want to go back and do it again. I'm lazy like that.
Right.
And Gary Gettle, I think I cut you off. You had another question.
Well, it was more of a remark concerning timelines. I in the very simplest form on Ancestry, which I'm afraid that's where I started and where I'm still pretty much stuck. They provide a timeline right there, and every time you add to it, it comes up. But on the Roots Magic software, there's a timeline available there. It also isn't there that comes up.
Yeah, in Roots Magic, one of the fun things about it, and I admit I need to go back and check Legacy because I think Legacy has this feature also. But within Roots Magic, one of the things you can do is you can list all of the things for your person that you're looking at, the particular one that you want to do a timeline for. And then there's a little checkbox up in the left-hand corner. And you can check that, and suddenly it will also show you all of the other interrelated facts for all of that person's relationships. So you can do a huge timeline out of that stuff if you want to work with it that way. The important thing is it allows you to toggle back and forth. So what I showed you all today is I showed you just the bare bones outline that I've got for my grandpa, Oscar Eskew Lee. But if I wanted to, I could have thrown in everything in there. All, when his kids were born, it would show that. When kids died, it would show when his siblings were born and died, anything about them, where they were at the time, because that can be really valuable information. But a lot of them, these particular databases they're very, very valuable to use because they keep track of things. And what I like is at the end of the year, for wherever I've been working, I can PDF each report. It's true. I got to do the reports on the families, but I can PDF those reports and throw them onto a thumb drive and give them for Christmas presents and say, here you are. Everybody can read the PDF. Everybody knows what's there, and all the stuff is there. And it sure saves me from having somebody say, could you run that stuff off for me? I do it once a year.
Thanks.
And so does Cheryl, by the way. Cheryl Lucas has some really fantastic things that she's been doing that she shares with her family with pictures. And we just find it really valuable to do that. And it's not my problem if all those nieces and nephews only have a telephone to collect the information on. I tell them to go, of course, to the public library where they will be helped to be able to put that information elsewhere. Other things? Nothing? Well, then we're talking about November 29, which is that day when we'll show some of those things, and you can show me what you got. I'll show you what I've got. And we can look at those various things and see how helpful they are. Even then, and again, realizing that many people find it more productive in their lives to do this strictly by paper and pencil. And I do understand that. It means more forms, but I've seen some people who are very, very well organized in doing that. Rita Gibson, thank you. She says to everyone, thank you so much, Jan. I always learn from you. Anything else for the good of the order? Or are we done for today? If we're done for the day, give me a hand wave or a thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. And I will see you on November 29. And thanks for being such a great group. See ya.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.